if you're applying to a AAA console type studio like Bethesda or something like that, it's going to look hugely different than any portfolio that's going to come into my studio, which is Zynga. So I'll talk to the 2D artist, kind of like mobile game aspect for that. So what we look for at Zynga is obviously a style that fits, the games that we're working on. But let's say I'm looking for a 2D concept artist. I'm mainly looking for mastery of, lighting, of composition, of, character design in whatever you're designing. And also some kind of point of view that lets me know that you have a thought process and that you have like some kind of concepts or, critical thinking behind what you're actually making. I don't want to just see the character that you made. I want to see how you came up with that character. What did the turnarounds look like? How did you come up with the outfit? Did you try different color variations, etc.? Like I want to know that you can think as well as create good art, because we need both of those in the artists that we work with in our studio, because there's a lot of revisions, a lot of iteration. And we need to know that you can, create various different results before we land on a final version. So that's basically what we look for. But again, it's going to be like, there's so many different art jobs within the studio that it really depends on which field you're applying to. So concept art is the one that I'm mainly doing art direction on. And that's what I'm speaking to. But, it depends on what they want. So if they want to reach out to me, I put my LinkedIn in the chat earlier and get more details about that, then I can definitely help you out with that.
So one of the questions I get from people looking to get into the industry is how many pieces should they be showing you?
I mean, it depends on, again, like I like to see different sections in people's portfolios. So I know that a lot of artists love to spread themselves so thin with all these different kinds of like, oh, here's my, like, I dabbled in 3D a little bit. Here's my 3D section. I'm like, if your 3D art, if you're just learning it and it's trash right now, it's okay if it's trash. Just don't put it in your portfolio. Put it on, your informal social media. Put it somewhere else. But what I want to see is your more accomplished work, the things that you really put time into and that you're proud of. So, I'd like to see different sections of your portfolio per project. So say you worked on a game jam or an animation, 24 hours, something like that. And you have various different projects. Put those in different categories so I know what I'm looking at first and foremost. It's okay if your style varies throughout those projects. That's totally normal for animation and it happens. But that's more reason why I like to see different categories of these different things, because it helps me align myself and orient myself with what's going on in that portfolio. From there, it's like presenting it professionally. Again, looking at artists who have done it before and who are working in the industry now. It's a really good reference for you to be able to present it. And I started rambling and I had forgotten the question, so I hope I answered.
No. You covered it and then some, But actually, that kind of makes me think about Fred, because Fred, even though you do more independent, more personal projects, those are projects that are being picked up and adapted for film and television as well. So, do you think about sort of packaging your projects to show to producers, someone like John, and say, hey, would you think about adapting this? Does that run through your mind, or are you just strictly this is my vision?
Well, I think it's important to always be able to have like your elevator pitch. Somebody's like, if you have like your projects that you have in mind and you run into somebody who's outside of your industry or in your industry, it's good to be able to package up like what is powerful about your work and how it can work elsewhere. But when you're doing comics, you should just be trying to make the comic. Like, you shouldn't be making the comic thinking like, this will be a great movie. It's like, no, just make the great comic first. It's awesome when things, I hope to get optioned, please, if anybody's listening who wants to do that, please do hit me up. But first and foremost, you have to serve the work that you're doing.
That's good. All right, we have a question. Actually, this is, John might be able to answer this one. How is the animation market in Montreal?
It's booming. Move to Montreal. The whole industry is booming in general. We're in a renaissance, especially COVID has shown that we can still pump out, TV shows and feature films and video games all from our our home offices. So definitely Montreal is booming. Cinesite is hiring. Other companies are hiring. Cinesite's a big proponent of diversity and equity. So we really push for that. So, I mean, I encourage you, if you're interested, contact me through LinkedIn, send me a message, and we'll take a look at kind of, your portfolio, what you have to offer, what you're looking for. At the very least, I can give you advice of how to advance your skills to make sure that you're more successful when you apply to one of our companies.
Do you have to live in Montreal or in Canada?
We prefer that because the Canadian industry is very much based on tax credits. So if you live here and you live in the city or the province, then we get a discount on labor costs. So that allows Canada to be competitive in the world and in the United States. But it's not exclusive. If the talent is right, if the skill is there, we will make the effort to hire you no matter where you are. Because Cinesci is about creating some of the best animation out there, and we'll take the talent even if they can't necessarily make it. But we prefer you to move to Montreal. It's a beautiful city and lots of culture. It's great. Winter is kind of cold, but that's okay. You get used to
it. All right. So, hey, we got a question for Obi. It says, Obi, I think your cartoons are mad funny. Have you ever offended anyone you've spoofed, and how do they let you know?
Yeah. And not anyone I spoofed, because a lot of times when I put people in there, if I know it may be kind of iffy, I will try to contact them first. Right. But I think the one that I probably was the people got the most offensive by, it was a cartoon that I was kind of I'm Nigerian, first generation Nigerian American. And it had me and Yvonne Orji in there. And it was me and Yvonne Orji, and we were sharing our like for Nigerian culture. And I drew a black woman next to us. And while Yvonne and I were sharing our like for Nigerian culture, she came out of nowhere and was like, Wakanda forever, right? And me and Yvonne were like, get out. Because that was just a thing with the Nigerian community, every time, or African community, every time we talk about African stuff, Wakanda forever started coming up. It was just a joke about hey, Wakanda, love Black Panther, Wakanda isn't real, right? It was just one of those jokes. And people got mad. People got upset to the point where Yvonne was like, you got to take my name off of this, right? and some of us this is fun, this is cool, but it was just weird. Or it just depends on what channels, where I drew a comic strip where I had a fake manager in there, and he was telling me how much he was like, I need you to do this project. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do it. I'm not going to do it. I have a brand. I don't care. And he writes on a piece of paper, and he's like, this is how much they want to pay you. And I look at the price, and the next scene cuts, and I'm dressed like the Little Mermaid, wig, the little shell bikini, and I'm singing on the rock, the song. And it was just part of the whole play with everything that was going on with with Haley, what's the last name? Chloe and Haley. But Chloe Haley, when she was becoming the Little Mermaid. No, she got cast to be Little Mermaid. So that was just my spoof on that, right? Saying I'll play Little Mermaid if they pay me the right amount of money. On my social media page, everybody loved it. Everybody got it. It got put on the Shade Room and got tore up in the comments about how they're trying to emasculate the Black man, and this is what they do in Hollywood. And some people were like, that's not that serious. Look at a joke. So it really depends on who's watching it, whose perspective. Everyone has a microphone now, and this depends on where it is. You see the different cultures and the different thought processes on different pages and different outlets. So it is what it is. I just want to make humor and have people enjoy it, and have fun.
All right. The Chaz, you kind of veer into the sci-fi. You're a sci-fi guy, right? You're a fan of sci-fi with your medium.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of I guess you could almost say genre, specific genres. I did a project called The Indies, which was a dystopian sci-fi hip hop project. The project I'm currently working on is a more traditional musical with the modern spin on it, Batu. But for me, at the end of the day, it's just storytelling with it's so wild to me how different a story is, if it's a white protagonist versus a Black protagonist. I think you would almost get different stories just kind of depending on how you play it. And so, for genre, I think that's it's a great time now to kind of start really letting Black people have a hold of the genres. Lovecraft Country is something that comes to mind. That was one of my favorite shows of last year, and it was just cool to see Black people in like a sci-fi-ish horror thing. Same with Get Out and Us and what Jordan Peele's doing. Yeah, I'm just a really big fan of seeing like us represented in those genres, because I think we're able to put a very unique creative spin on it that no other kind of studio can really replicate without us genuinely being involved in the storytelling and producing process.
Do you now? So for your current project that you mentioned, Batuu, is that where can people find that? And do you write and draw your own projects exclusively, or do you ever work with other people?
Yeah. So Batuu, you can actually find us on social media. If you just type in Batuu musical, it'll pop up. And we were a Kickstarter that we ran in 2019. It was a successful Kickstarter. And that's a whole nother like topic of, I can go on for days about how awesome Kickstarter can be for independent creators, just kind of establishing their IP and getting an audience kind of centered around it. But yeah, no, I wrote and am directing a musical. But within that process, I do have people in my corner who I've run every single thing by, in terms of like music, like when I was writing the lyrics, just finding my friends who were producers or people who did like music industry stuff, just getting their feedback on it. When it came to the actual script writing stuff, reaching out to producers and artists and other screenwriters that I know who I admire their work, and I know they are also big fans of musicals. And so it for what I'm trying to do with this project is trying to meet people in the middle. Growing up, I loved musicals, and a lot of my friends did not like musicals. They're kind of polarizing in a way where it's like you either love them or hate them. I feel like very few people are like in the middle. So it was really kind of about trying to find out why people who don't like musicals, what specifically don't they like, and how can I create something that kind of meets people halfway to where when they're watching it, they don't even realize this is a musical. They're just enthralled by the story and the characters and the designs.
Nice. Okay, so we have a couple of questions here. Jarius asks, Jarius Lewis asks, would you say that a person with a degree versus someone self-taught would have priority in job openings? Now, I think I can answer that. And Lauren and John, if you think that I'm wrong, please say so. I've always told people it does not matter. Your degree does not matter. It's all about your portfolio. Where you went to school is conversation, I guess, when you hang out in the offices after you got the job. But the producers and the art directors just care about the work itself. Would you guys agree?
Absolutely correct. It's can you do the job? Do you know, if you want to be a modeler, can you describe how you use Maya, how you use ZBrush, how you get, to do like a grayscale model of your character? If you know your craft, if you know the software, that's what we're going to hire you on, and your strong portfolio. You could have all the education in the world and still be terrible, and you can be self-taught and be amazing. So it really is your portfolio and your understanding of the software, especially in 3D, is your understanding of the software. And we'll hire you regardless. You just have to demonstrate your ability.
Would you agree, Lauren?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I like when I see resumes, I do not care what college people have gone to or if they even have a college listed. What I really am looking for is their portfolio. Again, do you know the programs? Do you know how to work with people? Have you collaborated before? The only thing that I will say is that a lot of people, where they get an advantage is their network, which you can get whether you're self-taught or if you've gone to college or not. But if you're self-taught, then you will have to put extra effort into growing that network, because people who will go anywhere in the animation industry. You never know where they'll turn up. But if they know that you are a good person to work with, they will recommend you if I see somebody's resume come by and I know that somebody knows them. So I'll just ask them, hey, how do you know this person? Are they good to work with? Et cetera, et cetera. And that helps me get a context on who you are, because otherwise you're a stranger and you're just at the same level as everybody else. But unfortunately, having that connection, having that network really does give you a lot of benefit there. But that's the only thing. It doesn't have to matter if you're, gone to a college or not, or if you've gone to SCAD or, anything like that. You have an equal shot no matter what.
Yeah, Lauren's absolutely correct. The network is extremely important in your success in this industry. And it takes time to build that network. So you won't get it right away, but you need to start to build it early, make those contacts, talk to people, and then they get to know you. And then, have good values when you work, work hard, work well. And I think it was Chaz that was saying it, the industry is small. As big as it looks, it's small. So if you have a reputation of doing a good job in Studio X, someone's going to hear about it. And that will kind of permeate the whole industry. So it's very important that you're as professional as you can, you do your job well, and you work well with others. Because if you can't do that, like filmmaking is collaborative by nature. It's not like a lone warrior type kind of work. You have to work with people and get along with people. And your network is a huge tool to help you become successful.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. And obviously, I think and also how you present yourself. And I've always said that people, producers, art directors, editors, they would rather work with someone who is mediocrely talented, but a nice person to work with than a genius savant who's a pain in the ass. So kind of think about that, because this is a collaborative medium. And honestly, like if you can't get the work done on time, let your boss know that you can't get the work on time. Don't disappear and not respond to emails, and then they see you pop up on social media. I see that a lot. It's a lot. Okay, let me see. What are the questions we have? Because we're wrapping up here. See how fast this flew. Okay, someone asked, actually, Jaron asked, now that some areas are starting to open back up, do you think the studios will continue to work remotely, or do you think everyone will need to be working in-house moving forward?
I can speak to that. It's going to be a hybrid. It's going to be a mix of both. So what we found out in the pandemic is that people who are working on, let's say, quota generating kind of work, in terms of doing seconds a week or doing shots of lighting, working from home seems to have increased our productivity. They seem to do a lot better, seem to get stuff a lot faster. But where things start to fall apart is that creative collaboration, which is essential to a successful project. Like you have a problem with your script or your story or your storyboard or your design. Being in a room with other people who are creative and bouncing off each other, seeing each other's body language, you create. I feel that that's what the pandemic has taken away, our ability to kind of creatively collaborate. It's not the same talking to boxes on the screen. Being in a room, getting stuff on the board, putting designs up, hashing through like narrative story problems, that really lends itself well to being in a group in an office. So I'm sure moving forward, the industry has changed because of the pandemic, but it's going to be a hybrid of both, where we're going to have like probably the creative heads, the brain trust in-house mostly, and then the artists and the animators and the lighters and the compositors, all that stuff will probably be able to work from home for a long time.
Okay, all right, that's great information. And so I guess we'll kind of like throw this to Fred as like the last kind of wrap up. So Fred, since you basically are like working on your own in your own space, what kind of do you find it challenging to sort of keep yourself on a deadline to produce the work as an independent creator? All right, Fred froze. Ah, all right. I'm sure, Fred. All right, just in case you. All right. Well, Fred was gonna kick. He was gonna give us a really good a piece of advice there. So, but I guess we'll kind of wrap it up. But guys, thanks so much. This just flew by. I have tons more questions for everyone, but I definitely want to thank Cinesight, who loaned us John and sponsored the whole thing. This has been a really great experience. So everybody, it's so great meeting you, and hopefully we'll all keep in touch. And everybody, hopefully we were somewhat interesting and gave you somewhat interesting information to go on. So good luck and keep creating.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Really
Bye, guys.
appreciate this. Bye, everybody.
Peace.
Peace.
Awesome. Cool. Hey, thanks.
Hello and welcome to the Afro Animation Virtual Summit. I am Victor Dandridge, the hardest working man in comics. I want to thank everyone who has been supporting this event all day long, but especially to those tuning in right now. It's my absolute honor to host Developing Original Comic Book Stories and Superheroes, which admittedly is a little bit of a feint. Many of our guest speakers who have joined us from all over the globe have talents and experiences beyond simply comic books. And we're going to delve into a fun and robust conversation that expands creativity in a number of mediums. And to that end, let's go ahead and introduce our panelists, shall we? Let's do this. Okay, so starting off, I think we're going to be brought in one by one. So let's get in. Can we get Prince Smith? We got Prince here.
Hey everyone, I'm here.
There he is. We got Lamont Pounds. Yo.
Yep. Hey, how's it going?
I love it. We're gonna follow up with Royce Adkins.
Yo,
Royce,
hey, what up, guys?
Hey. Next we have Jeremy Nixon.
Hello.
Hello. Next up we have my man Newton Lillevoix.
Hey guys, what's up?
And last but certainly not least, let's hear for TJ Sterling.
Yo, what's up,
my guys? Absolute pleasure. Jeremy looking dapper. I need to.
Jeremy.
As always.
Okay. Man, that's what I like. Yo, so okay, again, the title of this panel is Developing Original Comic Book Stories and Superheroes, but so many of you have talents and experiences far beyond that. So we're just going to kind of keep it as wide reaching as possible so that those people that are watching can really learn as much as they can. So let's keep it 100. We'll start with Prince and get you guys to introduce yourselves as well as what is your profession.
Hi everyone, my name is Prince. So what me and my brother do at Adventurous Minds is we create animation shows and cinematics and stuff like that for projects. We're currently working on our original series, but that's another time and place. And that's about it.
Super simple. Now, you mentioned your brother, but just so those people that don't know, Lamont, you want to jump in there?
Absolutely. So I am the brother to this man here. And yes, we both founded our own company. It's an animation production company. And we understand we are in a comic tab, but we are doing the same thing that you wonderful artists are doing as well, which is creating wonderful, inspirational or inspiring stories that represent people of color and just, represent people in general. But so we own an animation company.
Nothing wrong with that. Now, Jeremy and Royce, you guys are working together. What are you guys doing?
Yeah,
Royce?
so sure. I'll start. So I'm Royce. I'm a filmmaker, and we're currently working on a animation called Biopunks, based off of what used to be a feature film script that I wrote, and then turned it into a comic book, and now we're trying to turn that into an animated series.
Brilliant. I love that. Now, Newton and TJ, I know you guys have for a while, but for everyone else, if they're brand new to the game, Newton, who are you, sir?
That's a good question. I ask myself that question every day.
Is that what we're doing?
No, my name is Newton Lillevoix. I'm mostly known for the creator of Crescent City Monsters, which is a horror noir comic book. Last year, we won a few Glyph Comic Awards, which was pretty dope and exciting. And we had our biggest Kickstarter last year, which raised around $31,000, which is awesome too.
Yes,
so basically, I'm a comic book creator, just like TJ. We take the independent route, and I'll probably be indie for life.
Hey, I love it. Respect. TJ, I mean, you obviously have a very successful Kickstarter jumping off right now. So let's give some love to that.
Yeah, man. I'm first of all happy to be here, be in the same room with you guys. I can tell we got some really talented creators in the room. If a couple of you guys I don't know, so I'm happy to meet you. I'm TJ Sterling, president lead artist of Ray Comics. We focus on telling stories about underrepresented characters in very, very unique and powerful narratives. Our flagship title, Alchemist, raised about $20K in Kickstarter last year. Our very first time doing Kickstarter ever. We're currently, we actually just dropped a new book earlier, I think a week and a half ago, for our next book, Joystick Angels, which is currently at $13K. So we're making moves, we're trying to do some cool stuff, and just happy to be here to talk about it.
I love it. I love it. Now, obviously, when it comes to creating something original, you have to have a foundation and things that you love. So when it comes to turning your passion into your profession, right? This is something that I think we all have to look at. What was your first memory of your particular art form, and how did you know when you wanted to do something in that field? Jeremy, I'm gonna start with you. I'm gonna pick on you for a second because you look so good.
Oh man, like I was a '90s kid, right? So I grew up on the like the '90s Disney films and Disney animations.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of amazing like 2D art going on in like Disney series in the '90s, which like kind of blew my mind. But I guess I didn't really know that I was going to end up drawing for a career for a long time. I loved to draw. I did a lot, but then I sort of finished school and I was like, oh, you can't draw for a living. I literally didn't consider it, right? Like it wasn't even on my mind. And so I did I dropped out of school when I was 16. I did a certificate in business computing, which was, I passed, but it was the most boring year of my life. And then
it's not really the fun stuff right now.
Exactly. I worked in a supermarket for a year and then I saw like a little ad. This is back in New Zealand where I'm from. I saw a little ad for an animation school and I was like, why the hell not? And so I did it. It was probably in my second year of 3 years that I was like, this is actually what I want to do, which is lucky because I was spending a lot of money on it. But yeah, so since then, I've just been in love with animation, the possibilities. Yeah.
No, that's fantastic. Anybody else want to jump in on this? Like, where did you first see the thing that made you want to do what you do?
Oh, I'll start. So when I started learning that this was my passion, because we grew up in a rough neighborhood, so I drew to escape reality, to create my own world. And then I didn't know this was a career choice until I ran into anime. And then I was like, what, you can draw and get paid for it? So I've been pursuing it ever since then.
Nice. Very nice. Very nice. Lamar, obviously you same track?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, Prince definitely, he's the one that inspired me. I seen him, he used to draw all these animated characters. When I think the first thing he was drawing was Dragon Ball Z. But what came to me and what I realized was it kind of, it's crazy. It's like being young and like being a kid is like we always know what we want to do. It's almost like it's written on our heart because it's the thing that allows us to feel free, like, you know what I mean? Like feeling joy, like to escape. We go into, you know, this creative aspect, and that's why imagination is so important because we dive so deep into something that just makes us feel good. So ours was drawing. That was a way of escaping. Ours was watching films. That was a way of diving into other people's stories and things that we've seen on TV. So just growing up, it's kind of like you just always knew that this is where you belong. But the only thing that kind of interferes with that is like when you step into reality or growing up, there's these other elements of like, you know, what you see and what you feel it sort of doesn't, you know, come together. Like, you know, what you see on TV doesn't represent you. So you feel like it's impossible. You feel like it's distant from you. So it's just like, you know, if you get past that feeling of like, well, no, I could make this possible. And you have people that support you, then you start to, you know, make it happen for yourself and make the decision. And that's when we just make the decision to,
I like that.
to just do this thing.
We're gonna have to delve into that one a little bit more. We're gonna come back around to that thought process.
Try to keep it quick.
No worries. I like that. Newton, what about you, man?
For me, well, actually, what Lamont said was interesting about the things that you enjoy as a child, right? Mm-hmm. So the two things I enjoyed the most as a child was one of them was computer programming, another one was actually creating comic books. This is back when I thought I could draw. So there I was a 11-year-old kid, you know, I was either drawing comic books or computer programming. But the thing is, I took the path of computer programming because it seemed a little more concrete in terms of what you should do, where you should go. Mm-hmm. So as far as a comic book creator, I never really said to myself, oh, I'm going to become a comic book creator until just recently. I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to go back to one of my childhood dreams. I'm already in IT. I'm already a computer programmer. So, you know, just let me fulfill that second childhood dream of being a comic book creator. So I took that, and initially it was going to be a side thing. Like I was going to do both because, you know, why not, right?
Right.
But then as I was getting more into as a comic book creator. I just started falling in love with it a whole lot more than when I'm doing it in computers. So it just right. So
I'm not saying comics are better, but
yeah. So now, you know, I'm gearing my life or leaning my life towards becoming what I call a creator, not just a comic book creator, but just a creator in general. Because, you know, anything related with art, I just want to I want to be a part of that. So for me, I guess you could say it's like a late in life transition into that being a comic book creator. Because I especially fell in love with it because I would get the feedback I was getting from people. You know, they were saying, "Oh, you know, I love your work." You know, no one ever at work in my IT job ever said, "Oh, I love that piece of code. You know, it changed my life." And you know, so you know, it's like night and day. And you know, I'm kind of hooked on the whole process of just even like so create. The previous panel before that, I was watching a few minutes of it, and somebody had said that filmmaking is a creative process. And, you know, in a way, if you're a comic book creator and if you're not doing everything yourself, like artwork, lettering, coloring, it's also a creative process. So I also love the creative process of it too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Speaking of someone that does it all, TJ, talk to us.
Yeah. Shoot, man. Like, when I think about, I guess, my creative origin, I mean, my mom was just basically trying to get us into something that we could digest as a parent. Like, how do I get my son into something creative? Will he gravitate towards? And I think parents are so pivotal in kind of deciding the trajectory of, you know, their children's lives on various different levels, but even creatively speaking, because oh, well, maybe you want to do sports, maybe you want to do this, maybe you want to do that. And for me, I always gravitated towards artistic stuff. So I like Looney Tunes, and my mom's like, oh, hey, why don't we try a comic book shop? So we go to a comic book shop, and, you know, X-Men #1 was the first comic I ever bought the day that it came out. And it was kind of one of those pivotal moments that had changed my life. I'm like, this is what I want to do. So I'm drawing on notebook paper and creating my own comics that are really, really terrible. But you know, there's a certain charm to them because, you know, just like Prince was saying, there's this innocence as a kid where you are in tune with you know, there's no external distractions of being like an adult. You know, you are like, hey, this is what I like. This is what resonates with me 100%. And from that point on, I've always wanted to do comics. And I think what kind of did sidetrack that just a little bit was my experience growing up in the inner city school. Like I grew up in like a very rough school system. So there was no funding for art. So freshman year of high school comes around, I'm not even interested in going to college for art or even doing anything. I was this close to just saying, oh, I'll just get a job. I don't really care. Like there just wasn't anything. And then my parents were like, yo, we got to get our kids out of this shit. So we go to a different school, and it was my art teacher who kind of reignited that fire. Like, hey, you can actually make money doing this. You can, you know, try animation. Like I started experimenting because my path is either going to be comics or animation, one of the two. And I was learning Photoshop and then Adobe Bryce and Lightwave right around the same time. So super close. But comics still won that battle. But still, I absolutely love animation. So shout out to everybody on here who's an animator.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Royce, based off what TJ just said in terms of, you know, your parents obviously being something that pushes you in a way, you've got to have some great stories in terms of creativity being a household venture. Talk to us. What did you see that made you want to tell stories?
Yeah, first I just want to shout out to all y'all who had your user tags already up by your names. I just realized I didn't have mine, so I had to fix it. So great job, guys.
No worries.
Yeah. So actually, yeah. So you know, being a filmmaker now, kind of how that even got me into it was I didn't know I wanted to do filmmaking necessarily when I was growing up, but what got me into being interested in the concept of like storytelling was going to see Toy Story when I was a kid in theaters. And I just remember, you know, we all watched that movie and was just like, wow, this is an amazing experience. And I just remember leaving the theater like, wow, okay, I want to find a way, how do I make people feel the way like that movie just made me feel, you know? So that was kind of my journey into wanting to be a storyteller. I didn't know what avenue it was going to take form. I did try and dabble in drawing my own comics as a kid, but I can't draw at all. So I was like, okay, that's not going to work. And I also love video games. So I was like, okay, maybe I could write for video games. And I just tried so many different avenues of like, how can I tell stories? And I always ended up coming back to like the thing that I just loved most, which was I just love movies, sci-fi movies specifically. So I was like, okay, maybe that'll be my lane. I'll write my own sci-fi movies, and then I'll be able to write, direct, and so like that's the ultimate goal, right? So that kind of got my journey into filmmaking and what I'm doing now. And then now transferring over to how I even got into the comic book scene, that was just more so me, one, loving comics growing up, but then two, having all these at least to me, what I think were cool sci-fi concepts, and knowing that what I wanted to do as movies would take a lot of money. And there aren't a lot of people who are willing to take chances on that stuff, definitely, especially movies with, Black characters at the forefront in the science fiction genre. So I had to kind of think, okay, am I just going to sit on these ideas and wait for someone to give me the okay, or am I going to try and find out kind of like another way to do this? And so I thought back to my love for comics, and I was like, okay, well, maybe this is something I can do. I've read them my whole life. This should be easy enough. Well, first, making comics is not easy. Learn that real quick. It's extremely hard. It is extremely hard. But that kind of made me cross over to that side. And then I kind of fell in love with that form of storytelling, because a lot of things had to shift from writing scripts to writing scripts specifically for comics. And it actually allowed me to dive into more of my stories in other ways that I probably wouldn't have really thought of, just thinking of as scripts in like, hour and a half films. So that kind of, it really, to me, I think expanded even my storytelling abilities, and how I got to play with images just like I would with film. But then I got to kind of dive into more of like internal personal things that you wouldn't necessarily really see in movies. But like the stuff you'd get to dive into if you were like writing a novel, so it's kind of like you get the best of both worlds. I see comics as like a mix of making a movie and writing a novel. And so I just fell in love with that. And then now that's just been my thing, just hitting the ground running. And and so now working with Jeremy, he's helping me as far as like elevating it to another level to see if we can turn this into an animated series.
I love it. I've definitely loved the stills and things like that I've seen from it so far. It looks fantastic.
Thank you.
When it comes to your artistic interests, right? How was that supported by your local community or your particular culture? We come from all across the world really here, and there's a lot of different things. TJ, you were talking about, the urban atmosphere was not as supportive of you being an artist of many things. Talk to us about what that sense was like, and how you kind of overcame that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's kind of interesting as a kid, like you don't even really, you're just a person. You don't even really race and all those social types, constructs aren't even a part of your thought process as a kid. You're kind of just, until something kind of traumatic happens to you.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? When somebody yells you out of your name, calls your name of some sort, or something happens to where you're like, well, wait a minute, well, why am I treated a little differently? And typically, all the classes that I took that were art related, specifically for comics, it was like I was either the only Black person in that class or I was one of two. So it was kind of one of those things that you knew that this wasn't a normal space for kids like me, or at least in my particular area. This is kind of how it was. So, but like anything else, it's like we just continue to push forward. It's like, hey, this, regardless of what the environment and the landscape looks like, I'm going to continue to do what I want to do. And you got to develop this kind of thick skin and, a little bit of like a stubbornness, but in a very positive way that is conducive to like just taking to the next level.
Was that the same for anyone else? That kind of lack of support or necessarily like the entrance to it based on your community?
Mine was a little bit opposite. But in school, yes, we were like I was like the only Black kid in the class, pretty much, that was doing art. Everyone else was, different race, different color. But it was strange because I was so immersed in my own world that I didn't really notice it because I'm just being a kid, And luckily, my mom, who raised us, she was blessing. Like she completely supported us from the beginning to end. I'm like, I want to draw for a living. She's like, yeah, I believe you. You got it. And then she bought my sketchbooks and color pencils and stuff like that. So I'm entirely grateful for her, because I don't think I would have went as far if it wasn't for that support, because that was everything I had, at the time. And I'm pretty sure it was the same for my brother Lamont, but I'll let him speak more on that. But yeah, so it's definitely hard thinking back and realizing it would have been cool if there was more people like me who did the same thing. Maybe we would have had something going as a young person, and then I could have developed it as I got older. That would have been amazing. Like that'd be great for the next generation if we can do that.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah.
Lamont, what do you want to add to that?
I would like to add on both notes from Prince saying that we had a lovely mother. Yeah, she's very loving. I mean, we're lucky to have her. I mean, because yeah, she's very supportive of her children. Like she kind of didn't put any limitations on us. She kind of wanted to not just protect us, but she just wanted to look after us in a way of protecting our imagination and our heart and stuff. So she was just doing whatever she can, like a mother. Like, you know, this is my child. He wants to do this thing. I want to take care of him. I want to make sure he can do it at least. And then going to TJ said such a great thing when it comes to, like, as kids, you don't know about this like social construct or the things that are happening behind the scene. Really, it's kind of almost like you only see what's in front of you at the time as a kid growing up. So what you see on TV, it just affects you as a kid. And what you see in school, it just, everything affects you in the present moment, but you don't look into the behind the scenes. So you really don't know what's going on, but you then, as you grow older, you start to understand, like, there is such a difference for some reason when it comes to me trying to do something. And the thing that starts to stand out to us and that subconsciously come out in our community, like in the people in our community, when it comes to friends, family, and teachers, and they don't mean to do it, but it's kind of like, well, when you look at people of color, what are they mostly successful in? So they kind of highlight these things. Like, to us, when it came growing up, it was sports. And if not that, then music. So they kind of highlight these things that they see us being successful in, because it's the one thing that kind of had the proof of us being successful in. So it was like, so sports was a big thing. And it kind of gets in a way, it interferes with your passion. And when you're wanting to do these other things, because you're like, oh, I want to do this. But it feels like if I want to have a better life for my mom and for my family and for my community, well, I probably have to get good at basketball or something. I probably have to get good at sports. I probably, have to dominate and just school and be able to continue those things. And we feel like that's the only way for us. So it's like, it just gets in a way of it. And,
no, you're absolutely right. The monolithic view of what we do for success as minorities is definitely kind of a community, cultural hindrance for sure. I am curious, Jeremy, when it comes to an international base, like, how are the arts supported internationally versus how they are in I guess in our neck of the woods in the US?
In terms of, do you mean sort of in terms of like kind of people, or like structures, like kind of like financial systems?
Do they have more supportive programming or pushing towards exploration of the arts?
I think, it's good. Just the word international is interesting to me, because I feel like I live in an international space. I feel like if I look at what I do now, I've been freelancing for 4 years now, and truly it's been with clients from like almost, probably more than half of my clients are like American in North America, but also New Zealand, where I'm from, and like Europe and stuff. In terms of support, so my work is like, it's like I operate as a business basically, and I have clients, right? So as much as I'd love to tell my own story, I'm like, I'm getting old now. I'm doing work to to make money, and it's kind of I think there are lots of there are like, there's funding in the UK. I think maybe it's not as I think it's not as good as it used to be under the current leadership, but yeah, I have never really tried to get grants for a long time. I did back when I was in New Zealand, when I was young and I had fire in my belly and I was like trying to tell original stories, and I'm like, I'll eat ramen noodles to make it happen. But in terms of,
we all know that ramen life right there. Like, that just hit a tone. Like,
yeah,
I remember that.
But yeah, so for now, it's more like I'm finding clients and getting people who want to use me based on my past work, and I'm just struggling along doing my own private personal animations in my spare time as well. So
nice.
That probably doesn't really answer the question, but
but it kind of does. It says that on an international basis, there is a difference that might be a little bit more open than, culturally speaking, many of us feel in urban areas. Like, we're not necessarily as pushed to go into the arts as might be allowed for in an open space, which is fantastic. So there are a couple of questions from the audience that I want to throw out to you guys before we keep moving with things. And this one, let's see. This one is a great one. What kind of education or training should a young person pursue? Are there any particular programs that are financially accessible and can still put you on the path that you guys have experienced? And I think this is a big one because coming from so many different, backgrounds and whatnot, we're going to see many, many things. So, Prince, Lamont, do you guys want to start? Go for it.
Yeah, perfect. So I've been through every program. So I started off my career through Photoshop, which I just learned was mission impossible.
Wow.
So we did everything from beginning to end in Photoshop. It took 3 times as long. We recently just learned it to Clip Studio Paint, which is I think it's $50 now that you can get the complete package, and it just handles animation like a beast. You could do Photoshop things in it as well. So Photoshop, as we all know, it can be a little bit pricey depending on what you're trying to get. But Clip Studio Paint is one-time payment, $50. You got it forever.
That's awesome.
And it's really good. The biggest problem I had was like the flat colors. So like comic books, flat coloring. That's a process that takes a little while. We usually source that out. Yeah. And Clip Studio is super easy. Just like a couple of clicks. If it goes outside the lines, there's a little adjustment, and it just works really quickly.
Nice.
And I think that's the only affordable program I can think of at the top of my head.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any look, Jeremy is shaking his head. Yeah. TJ, any throw-ins on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. So like I said, when I had transferred from the school that had no money to a school that had a tiny bit more, that's where I had learned Photoshop and Bryce and all these other programs. But I would say too, if you're a parent and you're watching this, the best idea really is to try to find free programs or like, let's say a library to see if they've got some of these artistic programs, or maybe if you can find a mentor for your kid. I mean, I'm a huge advocate of mentorship. And a lot of times you can actually find those mentors at an event. Obviously, we ain't got no events right now, but when we do get those events back, take your kids to comic conventions or comic book signings or anything that has lots of pop culture professionals working, because then you can ask them questions and say, hey, my kid loves your work. Would you mind mentoring him a little bit, showing him some of these programs? Clip Studio is an amazing program. I use it to draw all my comics. There's an animation component to it, which is absolutely incredible. Photoshop you need. I'm kind of bumming that off my day job at the moment. So
stay listening. Don't tell them that.
But yeah, there's quite a few good stuff out there. You just have to look a little bit. That's all.
Absolutely. Newton, from a writer standpoint, what tools are we using to create stories? What are you putting out there into the world so that other people can follow suit?
So for a writer, just make sure you take your high school classes, right? I mean, that's as much as you need. Right? So there's not a lot of tools. But in terms of just perfecting your technique, I recommend whatever you're a fan of, you just consume. Make sure you consume a lot of it, right? So if you're an anime fan, just consume a lot of anime and take a critical approach in terms of like what you're consuming, right? Like, what do you like about it? What don't you like about it? The various styles, the way they structure their stories. Just absorb all of that and just become not just a fan of that medium, but also a critique of that medium, and just absorb all of it. And so when you're watching something, watch it as a fan, and also watch it as somebody who's like, okay, so I see what they did with this character here, but I didn't like what they did with this because it's inconsistent. So just breaking things down in general. Read a lot, because that's where I get a lot of my ideas, especially from Wikipedia. I'm not sure why. I'll go down this. I'll look up something in Wikipedia, and then I'll start digging into something else. And so it goes into this rabbit hole. And the thing I find about that is, like, the more you know, especially like real life stuff, is really inspiring in terms of a baseline for a story. because I'll read something on Wikipedia and be like, oh, that's interesting. You know, I never knew there was some ancient society that, you know, blew bubbles with you know, with things. So, like maybe I could, you know, use that character.
That might be a story thread.
Yeah, exactly. So
absolutely.
You know, the more reading you do, and plus it opens up your mind too in terms of possibilities of what's out there. A lot of people, they worry about reading other people's work and kind of, I guess, unconsciously just or subconsciously absorbing it and regurgitating in their stories. But I don't think, you know, that's something you should be worried about. So as a tool for a writer, the next thing I would recommend is just writing. So reading and writing,
I mean,
the two biggest things. Yeah,
absolutely. No. That's sometimes the simplest answer is the best answer. Occam's razor. So, you know, no worries on that one. 100%. Yep. Royce, the question that we were talking about just now are the tools as writers that you know, we might be using. So, is there anything in particular that you are writing with, whether that's a particular program or anything like that?
Yeah. So right now I'm kind of using just a couple different ones. So, you know, when I'm writing scripts, you know, I use Final Draft. And then, but once I moved over to, you know, writing scripts for comics, at first I kind of just wrote the same format. So I would use Final Draft, but I've actually been experimenting with some other programs. Scrivener's one I actually use pretty heavily. Because a lot of the stuff, I love all the file management, everything, how you can sort everything within Scrivener. That so that one's actually been really great. Other than that, like, you know, then it's really just if I'm doing some quick work, I'll literally just use the Notes app on my phone. But yeah, I would say that's kind of like the main stuff. And then I use this other app called Scriptation. That you get on your phone or your tablet, which is really great for if you're reading through scripts. It doesn't have to just be scripts. It works for PDF documents, even JPEG images, all that stuff. And it lets you annotate, mark down. You can share those annotations with your clients, or if you have like a group, you can all sync together. So you can see everybody's notes. So Scriptation is definitely really great if you want to try and collaborate with other people and everyone's taking notes and kind of throwing out their ideas on a document.
No, that's awesome. That's like a digital writer's room.
Literally.
Tristan White wants to know who can share thoughts on the crowdfunding process. I know some of you have definitely done so. I don't know if everyone has, but I mean, TJ, you got one going on right now. So feel free. Let's jump in on that one because I think that's the next wave of how, you know, people can create without barriers.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll quickly go into this because I know I would love, you know, Newton definitely should weigh in on this as well. He's definitely got some genius and some mastery behind it that I've learned from him as well.
That's the name of the game.
I mean, a lot of it too, man, is just building. I mean, so many of my fans have come from in-person interaction. I mean, I did in-person interaction, in-person events for 5 or 6 years before I even did a crowdfunding campaign of any kind. So I had this solid base that would support me and come to every show and come visit me and buy the latest books, and they were always there. So letting them know how now, hey, like I don't have any more cons coming up because of the pandemic. Please support this. It's a lot more of an easier sell. I do find it a little bit more challenging to cold sell someone or to cold tell them about my business if they've never even heard of me. But that's also kind of the fun challenge. Like, how do you make it a connection, or, you know, how do you connect this thread between you and this other person organically through an inorganic platform? It can be done, but it just takes a little bit more work, in my opinion. But, you know, paid ads, you know, obviously being on Twitter and Facebook, and then understanding the markets in which have different demographics of people. Obviously Facebook, LinkedIn, some of those places gauge a little bit higher in the age range. Places like, you know, Twitter, as well as Instagram and TikTok, range a hell of a lot younger. So, I mean, who are you trying to reach? I mean, I have a YA book that I'm doing right now, so I'm heavy promoting on like those younger platforms on top of my regular usual promotion for the older ones. So trying to think of it in those terms also has just been a very interesting learning experience overall, but it's constantly evolving and changing.
Nice. Very nice. Newton, since he threw you the alley-oop, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, before I do, make sure you check out TJ's Kickstarter campaign. It's called Joystick Angels. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of crowdfunding, especially Kickstarter. I just completed my fourth Kickstarter, and I think I mentioned earlier that it raised around $31,000. And that's not a hey, I did that overnight thing. That was my fourth one, so it takes a while to build up to something like that, and it takes a lot of work. But I'm still a fan of the whole Kickstarter process because it just exposes you to a broader audience. Like TJ say, as a comic book creator, you also have the option to do cons, and you could strictly do cons and make a lot of money from it. That's still possible. But the thing I like about Kickstarter is that you're the audience that you're building, you keep track of. Like after my first Kickstarter, I was able to say, hey, I'm going to start a second Kickstarter, and I was able to send a blast to them, and they were like, okay, cool. So on day one, there was a ton of people from the first one that came out, and then you start building an audience like that. And then the great thing about it too is like business-wise, you could think of Kickstarter money as like pre-sales, right?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, the idea is that you're taking the money up front, and then you're going to provide them the product, right? Sometimes the service, it depends on what Kickstarter, but in particular comic books, you're providing them a product. So a lot of people, the way they think about Kickstarter is sometimes they might think of it as a GoFundMe. It really isn't. Well, you should think of those campaigns, or you should think of them as more of pre-sales, right? Someone's giving you money up front so you can produce a product for them, and that's the way you should look at it. And the platform itself is great at helping you promote, but at the same time you have to do some promoting yourself.